Hey everybody, and welcome back for another Deadzone painting tutorial. Today I'm working on Nastanza for Deadzone for the Asterians. This model is off of the Mantic Vault. I believe she has some roots in, I want to say Stargrave, but I don't think that's right, the board game. I didn't do a lot of research into the history of the model. I thought it was a sharp looking model. I knew it would fit with my Asterians in Deadzone, so I figured I'd print it off. This model is printed on an Anycubic Mono M2X using Anycubic's ABS-like resin. So I've primed her black, I've done a Zenithal white, and I'm applying Army Painter Hive Dweller purple as my base coat. It's a speed paint. I'm going to base it out in that speed paint, and then we will move on to do what Don Cerritos refers to as the double slap chop. Plus, there's a plus. You can go look him up and get the full rundown of a really excellent painter who does some miraculous stuff with these speed paints. But let's go ahead and move on to the next part. With our initial base coat of the Hive Dweller done, we're going to let that dry and come back now, and we're going to dry brush over the highlight areas using Pro Acryl Old Titanium White. We're going to do this as the base to apply a second layer of speed paint in a lighter tone to establish a little more depth, color, and contrast with the model. With the dry brush finished, we're going to come in and use Periwinkle Purple by the Army Painter, and we're going to apply a second layer of speed paint over our highlight and initial layer. Ended up with an ugly blur here. I'll spare you the details. I'm painting the trim on her shoulder pads using Pro Acryl Burnt Red. Here you can get a better look at the burnt red that I applied to the model in the previous very short step. Next up, we're going to apply Pro Acryl Purple, and we're going to apply this to all of the edge highlight areas on the model. With the double slap chop that we did previously, we've already got some nice color depth, so we're just going to focus on this single highlight to bring out any areas where light's really picking up on the edges of her armor, just to make everything stand out a little better. So using black, sky blue, and Old Titanium White, we're going to do the little gemstones on her shoulder and all over. You start with black, a little bottom corner of blue, and then a dot of white. I normally don't choose black to paint weapons. Typically I use a very dark gray and then maybe a wash, but in this case I decided to use speed paint Grimm black to paint her rifle. I figure she's a stealthy assassin, she's probably got, you know, a stealthy rifle. At this point, while I was working through the model, I decided I want that highlight to stand out a little bit more. So I took a little bit of the white and purple that was already on my palette and just mixed up a slightly lighter tone, and then applied that in a very thin line along or inside the highlight that was already on the model. Returning to the rifle, I'm going to use dark neutral gray just to apply a top highlight to the rifle. The areas where the Zenithal was a little too thin for that black to really cover, we're just going to put that dark neutral gray over there to suggest a highlight, but also to kind of bring the weapon back a little bit at the same time. One of our last major areas to take care of on this model is that face. So let's get to it. We're going to start by applying a base coat of beige red to cover the initial skin tone. With our base tone applied, we're going to snag just a tiny bit of black off the palette, and we're going to painstakingly and anxiety-inducingly put some black in the eye area. We're going to follow that up, of course, with a dot of white. Now, it may seem weird that I'm doing this now, but the reason I'm doing this before applying any highlights to the skin tone is that if I do make a mistake, it's much easier to cover up the regular skin tone than it is to cover up that highlight that I've already made. And her other eye is hidden by the scope pretty well, so we only have to paint one eye. I either failed to shoot or lost the footage of using the olive flesh to do the highlight. So real quick, I used a mixture of the red beige or the beige red and the olive flesh to create my initial highlight tone, and then final highlight of just straight olive flesh. It's pretty standard practice, but I missed that. But what I'm doing here now is I decided that, as a bald-headed individual, I know that we can look pretty boring to the average passerby, so I wanted to give her something going on that noggin. So using my purple that was on the palette, I thinned it down to a very thin glaze consistency, and I'm just trying to apply some war paint in very thin, light layers to the model. I felt like this turned out pretty well, so I wanted to make sure that I left all the footage in. I'm just going to speed it up here so you can see the whole process. In order to get everything to blend together better on the head, I decided to use a thin down light tone wash just to make sure that the details on her face and the highlights and everything kind of blended together a little better. Well, we're winding down to the end here. I apply speed paint, Runic gray, and Ruddy fur onto the base just to make sure I can pick out all the fun little shapes and crevices of those 3D printed bases. Simple process. I don't do much beyond that other than pick out some of the shell casings with some copper. As is always the way, rim that base. My preference is black. Your preference may vary. And as a final touch, after the speed paint is dried, I'm going to go in and use copper to pick out the shell casings that are lying on the ground around the model, as well as the ones that are strapped to her forearms, just to bring a little continuity in there and make it look like she's been taking some shots from one spot, which I think is bad sniper strategy, but that's just what I learned from TVs and movies, I guess. Anyways, this brings us to the end of painting up Nastanza. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you found something useful out of it, or at least were entertained. I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and feel free to share it to others who may get something out of it or have a good time watching it. Regardless, thanks for hanging out with me and have a good one.